Perfect. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. It's good to be here, and it's good to see some familiar faces and to meet some new ones. I was talking to Kathleen yesterday about this talk, and she had told me, just for transparency, that there were people who were kind of worried and had anxiety about how this could go, which I totally understand. I get anxiety sometimes with these conversations. I've been doing them for a long time in the Tri-Cities, over 11 years now. But I feel confident enough with the information that I want to present to engage you, to not only educate, but also to strengthen our community. Because there are a lot of ideas that we all share that are pushing us apart, but they're ideas, right? And ideas can bring us back together too. And so, what I want to do is present my experiences, my perceptions, my philosophies around not only racism, but being somebody who's Black in the Tri Cities. I've been here since 1986. My family migrated from Oxnard, California. The truth is, my mom, she was a prostitute, and her pimp had kidnapped me and my brothers and held us hostage. And one of my brothers is Down syndrome, and this guy used to beat us. And in order to get away from him, somebody had to help my mom escape. And we escaped to Pasco, Washington. We moved here, and I meet my grandma, aunts, uncles, and every single one of them was a drug addict, selling drugs, using in and out of jail, and nobody had an education. I didn't grow up with a father, and all my uncles were often in and out of prison and jail. So that's kind of the my introduction to the Tri-Cities and meeting family here. My mom, she's white. She was born here. My grandma, she's white as well. So she married a Black man and had Black children. And my uncles and aunts and my grandma used to tell me when I was a kid, they remember the sundown sign hanging on the green bridge. Remember the green bridge that used to be by the cable bridge back in the day? And the sheriff would escort my grandma and her children, my aunts and uncles, over that bridge before sundown because of Jim Crowism. So that is that's one part of one of my first experiences with racism in the Tri-Cities, or understanding it. I never understood fully, and we were always told the stories of civil rights and how things got better. And so the fight for equal rights and justice seemed to cool off, but then the practices and the systems continue to quietly and silently eat us up or erase us, right? And so we'll get to that here in a second. That's a little bit of an introduction. When I do these talks, one of the most important things for me is to create a safe space. I work with vulnerable youth. I work with vulnerable people and populations. Everybody from kids who have been beaten and molested, to natives who are living on reservations, to even murderers, who are going off to see life sentences. I paint with them. There's nobody that I can't speak with. There's not a question that I'm not willing to handle. I won't claim to know everything. I won't have a bunch of statistics and facts, and I won't debate anybody. If I don't know something, I won't be so stubborn as to just double down on my implicit prejudices and biases just to prove a point. I won't Facebook fight with you here, right? And I won't encourage you to do it either. I encourage us to have a courageous conversation, a dialectical dialogue where we are not trying to use zero-sum tactics to squash out the other person's point of view, but all just to validate one another enough to get to an understanding. That's all that we can really truly reach for in these conversations right now, is an understanding, not necessarily agreement, just understanding, because that allows us to have an empathetic connection, right? It allows us to, if we can build just on understanding, we won't have this feeling that we need to be on attack or be on guard or have so much anxiety around something that's tearing our country and our world apart, or the collective human spirit apart. When we talk about racism, we're not sitting here collectively trying to deactivate a bomb. That would be the wrong metaphor. What we are trying to do collectively is heal a wound. So there's a bedside manner that I think is so necessary when having these conversations and these dialogues. So with that being said, there's room to F up in this group. And by F up, I mean forgiveness. right? We have grace and compassion as a backup tool. If one of you say something or feel something or offended by something, we can forgive each other, or we can get mad and angry and flee. But I invite you to stay with it. I invite you to try to conceptualize another person's life experience that's different from yours. And I would definitely love to hear some of your life experiences, because the majority of the room are white folks and white men that I can't assume. But when we talk about white men, the heterosexual Christian, the person who in socioeconomic cultural ladders has the most power and privilege. And I do know that white men feel targeted and attacked. I have several white men friends who we process this stuff, because there are intersections where Black men and Black people can definitely understand what it feels like to be targeted and oppressed. But once we put it under a microscope and begin to deconstruct it all, there are ideas that we can isolate that will bring with it its own truth, so you can see yourself. So we call this being woke, right, in the activist community. So in this talk, I want to talk about All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, racism versus sexism. I want to talk about hate, racism, conscious hate, implicit bias, and complicit crime. And don't worry, I'll cover all these. And if you want the notes, I don't mind sending them either. And what juvie kids fear when they go to prison. So with all that being said, one of the very first things I want to open up with is one of the reasons why it's safe to be able to talk in a space like this is because of two eyes, right? Intention and impact, right? We can be as crafty as we want with our intention, and we can know our intention. Like when somebody says all lives matter, we can hear the intention. It sounds like this innocuous chant or requiem for all of humanity. But when it is a hashtag that's employed whenever you see Black Lives Matter, it's an invalidation of the group. And here's why. I mean, you may have read the article that I wrote about All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. And I bring up this situation where the Westboro Baptist Church came all the way, I believe, from Kentucky to protest a Marine who had died. And there was a funeral at the track, right? And these Westboro protesters came in a huge horde with these disgusting signs, derogatory statements towards the LGBT community. And this was happening at a funeral. And it was so offensive, and it caused so much more pain and suffering that the family sued the Westboro Baptist Church for $10 million. And I believe they won. And the goal was to bankrupt the church so that they lose power and can't go around causing more pain and suffering at funerals of fallen soldiers or for a family that's grieving. When we see the All Lives Matter hashtag, it is no different than the Westboro Baptist Church picket signs to us. We're grieving, the collective human spirit, especially within Black people, especially when we all saw George Floyd get killed the way he did. The mounting pain and suffering exploded in all of us, almost as if we were on a singular consciousness. It's kind of it's bizarre, really, but it also makes a lot of sense. I mean, here we are in a quarantine. No more distractions. We don't have the 9-to-5 distraction. We don't have school distraction. And we are here in our living rooms watching a man get murdered unjustly. And now with all this free time and this clear conscience, we can no longer sit by and allow injustice to continue to reign in this country. And the pain, the tsunami of pain that we've been watching roll across the country and around the world, it makes perfect sense. This is a man named Jiddu Krishnamurti said that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly ill society. If there is injustice in all these different corners of our country, and it's one of our guiding, enduring spiritual principles, even in our faith, are we being faithful if not fighting for justice? Are we actually who we say we are? Whether it's in our God's eyes or from our own words. It's funny that you guys opened up with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I struggle with the Pledge of Allegiance Not because of anything from Colin Kaepernick or nothing like that. I was taught to not do the Pledge of Allegiance when I was a Jehovah's Witness as a kid. We didn't get blood transfusions, celebrate holidays, and we weren't allowed to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't know why. I just did it. The first time I remember ever really standing up and doing the Pledge of Allegiance was when I joined the Marine Corps. So I look at all these entangled, confused systems that we have, and I'm saying, well, how do we pick this apart and get down to it? Well, definitions are so important to me, especially being a wordsmith. When we look at the idea of racism, a lot of people are immediately lost on it. And if you ever accuse somebody of being a racist, they'll go, I'm not racist, I'm not a racist. Richard Pryor, one of my favorite comedians, said, he's like, I met a lot of people in my lifetime, but I've never met a racist. Right? And people deny it because, there's something good about that, because at least people still know that it's wrong and it's bad to be racist. But we're operating on an old definition and one that doesn't really work and apply. And I think it's really hard to break it down. So what I'm going to do is break down what racism looks like today and how we are attacking it, how we are practicing dismantling it, so that you understand really what's happening even here in the Tri-Cities. Racism, let me ask the group this question. Can anybody tell me why it's impossible? And Sigdom, you can't answer this because you were on my last lecture. Can anybody tell me why it's impossible for Barack Obama to be racist on American soil? And anybody can raise their hand on this. And even if you disagree, it's okay. But because I'm obviously going somewhere with all of this. Why is it impossible for Barack Obama to be considered a racist on American soil? No takers? Does anybody disagree? Oh, okay, go ahead, Joe.
You got to unmute, Joe.
Oh, yeah. You got to unmute yourself, Joe.
How about now?
There you go.
Estimate that because he is a member of the minority, because he is quantified or qualified as a victim of racism, that the theory is that he's not able to be racist because he's in the role of a victim, as opposed to a white person who's considered to have white privilege.
Very good. See, hey, now we have to have a beer fest and vote for Joe right off the bat. Now I want to deconstruct that, because I see it on the faces, and I do this enough to know where disagreement comes in, and it's all around the definition. So when we talk about racism, we're talking about a system, okay? Racism is race plus power. Race plus power equals racism. Just like sex plus power equals sexism, right? And I'll paint down how power plays into this. Because when people think racist, immediately they think KKK, skinheads, lynchings, burning crosses. And nobody wants to be associated with that. No more than any time somebody describes a Black person as a thug. We're not all thugs, right? So when people think of like racism, they go, oh, KKK, burning cross, heals conscious hate. I'm not consciously hateful. And I can sense that. This room doesn't have I don't feel any conscious hate coming from this room. But I know that there is racism in this room only because of the power dynamics, right? Now, when people think of racism only as conscious hate, you're going to lose the game, get defensive, your feelings and everything will come into it, and you'll defend your good heart, your kind heart, your intentions as a good spirit. And that is something that we can generally see just in your actions and your way of life. But what we're trying to do is draw the conversation over to systems that have been put in place that eradicate Black lives, that at every entry point of access to prosperity and safety in this country are guarded by racist systems. So when we think of the housing industry, there's gentrification there, healthcare. Right now, the Black community, we're scrambling trying to find mental health for all of our community members. And we're so quiet about it because the one thing you can't be is an angry Black person. The next thing you can't be is an angry, mentally ill Black person. So we're very quiet about it. ESC Flavian knows. And so it's something that we have to do to survive. We have to keep quiet about our illnesses and our healthcare. right? Education. I'm the first one in my family to graduate from high school and go to college, right? Education, and then we have the job market. So when we look at systems, we have to look at, well, if there are Black people missing from these systems, why? Why is there such a need for diversity and inclusion? My contention with diversity and inclusion trainings, organizations, committees, all this, everybody wants to talk about diversity and inclusion, but nobody talks about erasure and genocide, and how it got this way to begin with. And a lot of times diversity and inclusion often means tokenizing people. It's like, hey, let's just mark a box. We have a Black person here. And then that person has to endure all the microaggressions, all the unfairness, suffer in silence because they know something is just not right or just. But in order to keep that job, in order to keep some kind of standing in the community, you must, what they do, what my uncles used to say is kowtow, right? You kind of code switch yourself into a white world because your Blackness, your culture, who you actually are, it gets penalized or ostracized into erasure or out of the scene some way. It's impossible for Barack Obama to be racist on American soil per the definitions that we're using around how racism is power plus race. But it's not impossible for Barack Obama or myself or Flavian to be prejudiced. We can all have prejudice. I can be prejudiced towards white people. I can be mad because certain white people who dress a certain way and sport the Confederate flag, I have prejudice towards them. I can have prejudices towards skinny people, bony people. But the difference is prejudice doesn't have power. Barack Obama and I do not have enough power. Oprah Winfrey, Russell Simmons, Jay-Z, Beyonce, all the billionaires I'm aware of that are Black, even with all that, they don't even have enough power to change the system themselves, right? So power is really what we focus on. And I'll spread the idea out a little more. I work with juvenile kids in the Juvenile Justice Center. And one of the kids who I've worked with for 2 years, right? He helped me with the Community Hope Wall. He's going away for 7 years. He left yesterday. He turned 18 and he goes off to the big house now. My heart is real tender today. One of the things that not only do my boys fear when they go to prison, but all men, what do all of us fear if we were to have to go to jail or prison? What's the number one thing that we fear? Does anybody want to take that? What's the number one thing we fear? Abuse, sexual abuse, or, the R word, which I don't like to employ around women, right? Sexual assault. The only place my young boys or men have to ever fear sexual assault is when we commit a heinous crime and we get sent to a deep, dark dungeon and we have to be overpowered by one or more men, right? For committing a heinous crime. Where do women fear being sexually assaulted? They can go on the wrong date. They can go leaving the gym at night, the wrong relative, the wrong friend, so this shows you how power looks in a sexist world. Us men, we don't even think twice about going on the wrong date. We don't think twice about leaving the gym at night. I don't fear walking around at night other than getting stopped by the cops or maybe somebody calling the cops and saying I'm suspicious. That's power. There's a privilege that I enjoy that I'm so blind to that I don't even have to think about it or consider it. All my women friends have either mace, some of them have guns, they have brass knuckles, they have all these different kinds of weapons to protect themselves, to ensure their survival. And when we flip that narrative back to racism, think of all the things that white people do not even fathom or think about when it comes to their survival due to their skin color. When I know that you might have fear of getting pulled over, but I know that you do not fear, like you don't want to instinctively call your son, right? When you see red and blue lights come on, I call my son as soon as I see a cop pulling me over, because I want to make sure that he heard his dad's voice before I go. This is how real and deep it's gotten for me. Now I'll just be vulnerable here. I've had kidney stones 3 times. This is the worst physical pain that the human body can experience, what I heard, even next to giving childbirth. And I've talked to women who have had both. They said they'd rather give birth than to have kidney stones. And I told my son, if you ever see me getting hurt, or if it looks like I'm physically being hurt by anybody out there, if it's ever caught on camera, understand that they're not giving me kidney stones, that I'm okay. We've rehearsed we've rehearsed, my community, we rehearse some of this stuff. We have will and testaments ready, all because we want fair and equal rights and justice. But what does that look like around town? Well, Joe and I were in the Marine Corps. I have some anxieties and stress and traumatic stress from, my experiences. So when I saw the Defend the Tri group propping themselves up around town like racist militias, it fully triggered me. It reminded me of a sundown town. It reminded me of enemies in war. It reminded me of the people who killed Ahmaud Arbery, and it reminded me of George Zimmerman. And it wasn't just me. I personally had capped out on the level of racism here and the lack of communication coming from leadership. This town has become psychologically unsafe to really live in, to feel like you can prosper. The last few barbecues that I've been invited to around the Tri-Cities, I have had to quietly tuck myself away and leave because of the level of microaggressions and ignorances that happen because there's a Black man at the party. I don't want to be center stage. I want to stand by the punch bowl and eat hot dogs, So I'm digressing a little bit. When the kids that I work with go off to prison, this is the only place they have to fear sexual assault. The only place any of you would ever have to maybe fear for your own safety being a white person is, well, geez, I can't really, even with all the anger that there seems to be between Black and white people, Black people behind the scenes do not have an ounce of like, I want to kill white people. I want to kill this person. I want to destroy this. It is quite the opposite. We are massively creating programs, education initiatives. We need help from white people, right? But we have to figure out a common language and understanding of how to do this, because when anxieties run high and like on the last Signum was there, on the last one with WSU, a man threw his hands up in the air and it was honest frustration. He said, well, if I'm a racist, then I'm a racist. What can I possibly do to help anything? I'm just a racist. And I was like, well, think of racism as an inheritance, first of all, because that's what it is. It's an inheritance, right? And you get to decide how you spend the money. When people say white power and white supremacy, of course, that's like, oh my gosh, that's KKK, skinheads, Nazis, evil, people who destroy. That is not who I am. I'm not consciously hateful like that. You might not be consciously hateful like that, but your implicit bias and your unconsciousness and willing to engage the conversation will have you be complicit in the crimes of racism. It will have you grouped in with those who are consciously hateful, even though that those are the extremists who are really out to kill and eliminate Black people with blood, murder, and violence. But if you're also just participating in systems that do this slowly over time, drive the mental health of a Black community down by propping up militias and guns and invalidating the voice. I'm having beef right now with Pasco City Hall because they told me that that racism isn't a problem in Pasco. The whole Black community saw this post between me and City Hall, and I was enraged. I was outraged the same way I was outraged when Lauren Nichols wanted the death penalty for illegal aliens. I was outraged the same way when Bob Park said he wanted Trump to build a wall around Pasco because of the Mexicans. I feel these things, that it hurts, because I know that without talking about something, without acknowledging a problem, you invalidate people into mental health issues, and the problem not only, it doesn't just persist, it grows. The Black community has almost depleted here completely in the Tri-Cities, and it's not because we don't like sunshine and 300 days of sunshine and water and the beauty that's here. It's the climate of racism that even Black folks around here are afraid to talk about, because the retaliation is real. It's quiet, but it's real, and it can be uncomfortable. And not just in the way of your feelings being hurt. When I first started opening up and talking about a lot of this stuff, I saw where my speaking engagements and my gigs were coming from. A lot of people have a perception of me that I even hate using the term, that I'm an angry Black man. I am an angry Black man, but I'm not just an angry Black man. You should see how many people I make. I'm so silly behind the scenes. When I feel safe, my humor comes out. I'm constantly cracking jokes. I'm a poet. I play with my nieces and nephews and I spin them every day. And I'm trying to protect them too. My first mentee, his name is Osaya Hama. He's Sudanese. And there's a picture of him on the back of the cover of the book we wrote last year called Keep Your Head Up. It's a part of the Community Hope Wall project. We got his before and after photo on there. He was heading to the penitentiary. Now he graduated from high school. He graduated from Legacy High. Right now he's in a hospital in Salt Lake City. Him and his brothers just got stabbed the other night, in the lung, and he has a bag in his lung. He has COVID. His brother got stabbed in the liver, tested negative for COVID, and the lung too. Last year I lost 3 kids. They're Black and brown kids. One was pregnant, and she was shot 17 times. You guys probably heard about it. We started painting the murderer, the one who did it. We were painting a mural the next weekend inside. And then I lost another girl. I considered her my daughter. Her name is Cindy Thatch. She died in a drinking and driving accident. I've started losing so many kids in various ways. It does something to your heart. It changes your priorities and your values. People often see me talk about Ninja Turtles and turtle power, and it's my way of trying to draw attention to the need of mentors and fathers in our community, leaders in those roles. I'm working with the Benton Franklin Health District right now on the Fatherhood Mobilization Initiative, where we're trying to really raise the conversation and create programs and inspire people to get involved in fatherless children's lives. When we think of fatherlessness in the Black and brown community, we often don't even think of the grandfatherlessness or the great-grandfatherlessness. We have lineage that's missing. That's protection, that's money, that's wisdom, that's guidance to make young boys less toxic and sexist so that they have guiding principles. And these things are missing from our communities. Whereas you guys might not even think twice about it. You guys probably have, I don't know this many old Black men. That makes me want to cry right now when I think about it. And so.
Who you calling old?
I don't know this many wise.
I've tried that before, and I kind of got slammed a little bit.
Oh yeah. Oh, you tried to call him
better.
Yeah.
Young.
Exactly. You guys are young, like in that movie Cocoon, right? Like, no, just kidding. I'm just playing. But the point of the matter is, when we're missing that level of love and guidance in our lives and communities, no wonder why we see so much turmoil, pain, and suffering that erupts. And then we're told that we can get pulled over and killed for a $20 misunderstanding. Coming home from the park, having Skittles and tea, and we get hunted and stalked, and our killers walk. Who wouldn't want revenge on something like that? Somebody kills your kid, you would want revenge. But even these families, even the communities that scream justice, no peace, nowhere does justice mean revenge in any of us. It means what the word means: fairness. God is fair. God is just. And if we're not reflecting this and we're not working toward, well, faith without works is dead. I'm faithful in this walk towards justice. I don't know what it all looks like. I'm learning a lot with the task force, just to give you some insight. And this isn't even stuff that I've revealed in the newspapers I'm writing for or on my Facebook. But, yesterday I met with Detective Marco. He's the president of the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police. Great guy. He helped start designing the 940 law for independent investigation of police use of force. He gave me a lot of insight and also creative vision on how to not only add to this law, but other laws that we can change with the training in general with police officers. And then today I'm going to meet with Gordon Whitaker's daughter and the mothers of Gordon Whitaker and Gordon Whitaker's father. Gordon Whitaker was killed by the Kennewick Police Department in February, and there still have been no answers. So me and Andy Miller are meeting today for the first time with the information, with the investigation as it is now, to unpack this thing. Now, I'll be honest with you, Andy has a lot of anxiety. I don't necessarily have anxiety. I'm ready to just be a Kleenex box and a punching bag if I need to be, because I know that there's pain there. When I talked to Marco, the detective Marco, and even in my article about it, the one thing I think that we all can be doing easily right now is increasing our communication. Increasing our communication. And this is different than debate. This is different than disagreement. This is like really listening and learning, like active listening and learning with one another, taking a few chances to like talk about racism with friends. Now, I will forewarn you, you don't want to start seeking out Black and brown people and say, hey, I want to talk about racism with you, because this will be taken as, and they wouldn't even be able to articulate it necessarily. But if you knew a bunch of sexual assault victims, the last thing you would do is seek them out and say, hey, I want to talk about sexual assault and the R word with you. You cool with that? Because racism is trauma. It is not, when people are victims of racism, they're not saying that they can't handle bullying and that we don't have thick skin. It's nothing like that. This is what I'll share. This is what I'll share with you. There's a documentary on Netflix called Chasing Coral. Have you seen it? Right. It's such a heartbreaking film. It's about the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia and New Zealand. And it's the largest living organism that we've ever known. The Great Barrier Reef is this beautiful network of corals and all this aqua life and sea life, right? And because of climate change, the ocean raised about 1.5 degrees, snuffing it all the way out. This Great Barrier Reef, the largest, oldest living organism known to our planet, is dead now. And right before it died, the snorkelers who were filming it saw all the coral reefs turn big, bleach white and lilac and all these beautiful colors. And they were in awe looking at this network, this large network of coral reefs just light up so beautifully. But those were the death throes. That was the Great Barrier Reef screaming to the world that I can't breathe. And then that was all that beauty, all that magic was it trying to get the world's attention to help it, to keep it alive. So when you see these protests, and they're very hard to interpret, I don't agree with all the Black Lives Matter protests going on around town. I don't. I know which ones I'm a part of, but I will not publicly condemn or criticize, because I know that healing begins with communication, and people need to be heard. When Martin Luther King said a riot is the language of the unheard, well, the only common sense solution is to listen. If we increase our communication, if we increase our listening, if we go ahead and commit to the difficult process of change, that's what Ernie Chapin taught me. You know, if we commit to this process, you can go from being a racist to an anti-racist. That is where you don't have to worry about any guilt, any transgressions that you have had. I mean, you can take ownership if there's something deep in your history, understand that it's probably learned behavior anyway. Give yourself grace and compassion now, but hold yourself accountable. Hold your friends accountable. Let them read a book. This isn't about, when we're thinking of racial justice, I think about wounds. I think about trauma. I'm aware of my own, and I'm aware of traumas that other people have, and there's a way in which I engage them, because I don't want to further cause pain and suffering. My responsibility is to educate myself. My responsibility is to listen. I have so many women friends. Like, I have more women friends than I do guy friends. I'm pretty sure of it. I have women friends that come and stay the night at my house. I'll sleep on the couch. They come, we hang out, we go on road trips. I have a lot of trust from women. And I know it's a direct result of the work I've done on my own sexist behavior, on the music I listen to, the jokes I tell, the way in which I flirt, what I would call flirting. I had to really reconstruct and reconfigure what it looks like to be safe to a vulnerable population, 50% of the population. When we see missing groups, missing people, or missing colors from our organizations, our communities, these tell stories. And I'll paint a picture with that. Right now, I think the Tri-Cities has roughly 3% of the population is Black, I want to say. And it's probably dropping, or it's leveling out. Some are moving here, some move away. Now, 3% of the Tri-Cities is Black. And I think Pasco probably is 68% Latino, I think, somewhere in there. But imagine if we flip this narrative, right? What if the Tri-Cities only had 3% women and the rest was 97% men? And everybody looked at this statistic, you would want to know why. And I don't know who would be rushing to move here. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be kind of like, I know women wouldn't rush to move here. If you look up the statistics and went, oh, 3% women, like, geez, like, no. Could you imagine what women would feel? How quiet they would have to be to hold together like a group to maintain their safety? Power is a real thing. We look at Sheriff Jerry Hatcher right now, okay? 6 women came out to confront him last year, band together to remove him from power, and he's still in power. I couldn't imagine what those women are going through to finally get the courage to get that together and still not be able to correct a person who obviously needs correcting. Now other fellow sheriffs and other organizations, there's a huge push to remove this person from power because of how rampant it's gone. So, and one more concept. Well, there's not just one more concept. I have a lot of stuff to unpack, but what I would want to do is begin to open up the floor to just some popcorn style questions. If anybody has something that they want to comment on or question up to this point, I'll open the floor.